Have you all here? Let's keep this energy going as we move into our next session. Our next speaker is Blair Canavan, the Director of Alliances for the PQC portfolio at Thales. Blair will guide us through creating a strong PQC readiness plan. He'll address the pressing threats and risks that we are facing and how to start building our defenses for post quantum cryptography. He'll share strategic steps and practical insights to help us counter these challenges, including ways to secure our PKI, code signing, IoT, and TLS. Blair will wrap up with real world examples, giving us the tools and ideas we need to get started with a successful PQC migration. Please join me in welcoming Blair.
Well, hello, everybody. My name is Blair Canavan, and I am calling in from Thales. And where am I based? In Ottawa, Canada, and I belong to the Thales Alliance team running the PQC portfolio and strategy here at Thales. This is a bit unusual because I'm by myself, and as you can tell, there's no one else in the room to give me the prompts. So this is going to be something that you'll see live in a couple of weeks. So I'm pretty excited to join here to talk to you today about PQC readiness and how to get your plan in gear. So this is about how to get a practical plan underway. And for those that are new to the quantum realm or the post-quantum cryptography realm, hopefully this will leave you with some inspiration to move forward. And for others that have been around this for some time, including myself, we can all learn. So I'm going to share with you hopefully some interesting points today. And from that, again, we're quite excited to join Encryption Consulting. We're very excited to talk about PQC and how it's moving quickly into our realm. And hopefully by the end of this session, you'll have some questions and you'll want to chase us down for some more detailed conversation. So let's get started, and let me walk you through what's most important. And before we do that, we might as well start with a joke. Why not do something that maybe is a little unusual? How many times do people walk in and say, hey, I've got a good quantum joke? In this particular case, how about this? A man calls quantum IT support and complains that his quantum computer isn't working. Quantum IT support responds with, well, have you tried turning it off and on at the same time? And for those who are quantum savvy, you might chuckle to yourself. For those, I don't want to have to explain that. But if you understand the concept of a qubit being in a 0 and 1 state at the same time, hence the joke, maybe this is more of a layup for those who are a little bit more familiar with quantum computers. A qubit walks into 2 bars at the same time. Anyway, I'm a little unorthodox in terms of how I approach this subject. Let's not be too serious about it, but there is a problem here. And we're going to talk about this in the webinar today. We're going to cover a couple areas of risk. We're going to talk about some industry challenges, and more importantly, talk about the context of the actual timeline itself and why the hype curve is well in effect or affecting some people's either perception or willingness to engage, or in this case, maybe this is the first time you've talked about post-quantum cryptography and why does it matter. Then we're going to talk a little bit about the path to success and some of the large enterprises that are engaged actively in moving forward with post-quantum resilience. And I'll explain that without giving too much up confidentially. And then, of course, takeaways. What can you do after you leave something like this in this type of webinar? So let me walk you through a few of those things. Here we go. First of all, is there a problem here? Now, depending on who you talk to, and when I say that, the hype curve, for those who spend a lot of time online and fancy themselves somewhat of a research specialist in this area of post-quantum or quantum computing in general, a lot has been said over the last many years. Some people go back over 20 years, and some people go back over 30 or 40 years in the quantum realm. But in the context of post-quantum cryptography, what we're doing is we're talking about the effects of cryptographically relevant quantum computers coming into play over the next few years. And many of us that have been around this for a decade or more, and we've been discussing this with friends, family, and colleagues and customers, that you need to get ready. Well, 10 years ago, getting ready probably doesn't have that much of an impact on your day-to-day concerns. You have bigger issues, bigger fish to fry. You've got ransomware concerns. You've got generic any type of cybersecurity threat that you're managing on a day-to-day basis. Post-quantum really didn't come into play, and it really is not a big deal to most people. But here we are where within the next few years, and arguably we're starting to see, like you see with Gartner, for example, that, hey, within the next few years, we believe that there's enough progress being made with quantum computers from the likes of IBM and Google and D-Wave and many others, Honeywell, now Quantinuum, coming into play with cryptographically relevant quantum computers. The number of qubits you'll hear often is the indication as to the height of performance. And so we're in the 200, 300, 400 qubit range. And why does that matter? Well, when you get to 4,000 or 5,000 qubits, error-free qubits, that's when you have the ability to use that in a contrary effect, or use a quantum computer for nefarious reasons. And I'll walk you through that in some degree through this presentation. But simply said, look, without quantum resistant encryption, and this is what we rely on for all things critical infrastructure as it relates to the digital infrastructure. So everything that's been transmitted or ever will be transmitted over a network is going to be vulnerable to eavesdropping and public disclosure. So these are the world's experts. This is not one group, and using confirmation bias, we just keep doubling and tripling down on one concept. No, this is a worldwide contingency of experts that have come together, including the likes of Etsy and many others, to describe that we are under intense pressure to solve for this problem over the next couple of years. So what I mean by that is it's not just algorithms. You'll often hear is that as post-quantum cryptography is really what you'll hear, quantum computers will come into play. So running Shor's algorithm and running this against current RSA and ECC, you're going to hear things like it'll be compromised within minutes or within hours. But think of that, if you step back for a moment, RSA and ECC with conventional computing are arguably impenetrable and would take 1,000 years to potentially break. So what we have here is a conundrum, which is we've relied on cryptography and never really concerned ourselves about it. But now these are potential points of compromise going forward, because again, the new paradigm of quantum computing is that it will use that Shor's algorithm to break RSA and ECC very quickly, a completely different paradigm. So that's why we're concerned about public key infrastructure and things like TLS and IPsec, things that we rely on for all things, all internet traffic. Certificates, which is the complete and absolute entropy, and certificates for servers, certificates for public key digital certificates for what we all use on our potential smart cards or on dongles, and so on and so forth. Identity and access management, everything relies on cryptography. And with regards to key management, not everybody on this call understands what key management is, but understandably, if you got a lot of keys to the kingdom, where and how those keys are controlled and managed from a life cycle management matters. And so this is why public key infrastructure is the underpinning of all this, and why it's under such duress over the next few years. So those who don't know Dr. Mosca, that's too bad. He's a great human being, and he's been talking about this for a very long time. And what he's been explaining for well over 2 decades with the Quantum Institute at University of Waterloo, my alma mater, so I'll free plug for the Warriors, is that this is something you need to prepare for. This is no longer of if, it is now when. And what we mean by that is that we have now seen the progress of, as I said, quantum computers such that it is now within the event horizon. We can see it over just the horizon. And some are arguing within 5 years, as I said earlier on the slide with Gartner. Others believe it's 10 years away. But again, the predictability is the problem. This is not like Y2K. We don't have a date. So Y2Q is a moving, shifting date that a lot of organizations are struggling to understand. So what we're saying is, even if let's say it's within 5 years, are you going to be ready for it? What if it's within 2 years? Most probably you're not until you get started. And that's what we're going to talk about today. So this is pretty much the easiest way to explain this is, if you look at the time you wish for data to be secure and the time it takes to transition to quantum encryption, you're already in the danger zone if you haven't looked at where quantum computers are, what your preparation, if at all, is currently at, your status, your quantum security maturity index, for example, that you'll hear from the likes of Accenture and others. A lot of organizations are struggling. Like, is it too late if I start 2 years from now? And the answer is probably. So planning and strategizing on this is really the concept today, is that you have to get started. Procrastination is not a plan, and that's what we're here to talk about today. Well, what are the areas at risk? Well, easily answered: everything, anything connected. As we all know, that we have everything from planes and satellites and hydroelectric energy, whatever you call it, autonomous vehicles, connected vehicles, smart meters. Everything that we rely on relies on public key infrastructure for authentication. And of course, the telemetry and the instructions or the code that's used to run these devices is now under duress, because what if it's compromised? What if somebody simply says, turn this vehicle left into a wall, or land this plane in the middle of the ocean? It's not about doom and gloom, but it's explaining that these are all within the realm of possible. And so the attack plane is immense. And you'll often hear, what is critical infrastructure? That's even under duress as to definition. You would argue that the internet is critical infrastructure. Why? Because the world's entire financial backbone runs on the internet now. We can't just dial the clock back, turn the clock back, and go back to analog. It isn't that easy. And by the way, we don't even have a plan how to do that. So we've got to utilize what we have and enhance what we already have in place. So that, of course, spans the, as I said earlier, the idea of a simple digital signature, which most of us take for granted. Why would that matter? Well, the integrity of a device, the integrity of software, firmware, anything that's running code, if compromised, creates fraudulent opportunities. If you're a man in the middle, how disruption of critical infrastructure, look what simple things like storms and hurricanes do. But that's a kinetic effect. But what if we had something that literally took the internet out for a week or two? How would that affect the world's trade? How would that affect travel? How would that affect, it would literally bring the earth to its knees very easily. This is daunting, but it's reality. And then, of course, those that wish to do harm from a nation state point of view, or stealing data, intellectual property, or nation state secrets. That is the harvest now, decrypt later. To some extent, you'll hear that. I want the data. I want to decrypt the data. I want to see what's been protected from my prying eyes. Those are things that when you experience this firsthand with organizations trusted with protecting that information, it's of legitimate concern. So a lot of these things, again, that we take for granted, a simple VPN relies on cryptography, and that handshake and the data that's now exchanged after that handshake has been met. All of these rely on public cryptography. So a quantum attack could take any or all of these into account. And so depending on the attack vector or the approach, that means that we can't just protect one, we've got to protect all. So you'll often hear organizations like Cisco, like Fortinet, the Palo Altos all over the world, they're working diligently to make sure that we're all interoperable, and that the standards that we already have, such as IPsec, are upgraded to post-quantum safe, or other alternative means to do secure file transfer, like high-speed encryption, and perhaps having a simple dedicated pipe that operates from an independence of transport independent mode, layers 1 through 4. We can do that today as well with post-quantum safety. These are things that are being discussed and actively being enhanced so that we're going to be ready for this. But here's the timeline I think that most organizations are now becoming aware of. And that's the idea that, again, over the last number of years, for those around public key infrastructure, we've known about these sorts of things coming for some time. We've talked about why we want to make sure that our code signing certificates are enhanced to PQC safe. We want to make sure that any captured data that's harvested now, we want to prevent as much harvesting as we possibly can. There's lots of theories as to how much data has already left the building, but it's certainly right now protected if it's sitting as a data at rest using AES as a symmetric key, as a symmetric encryption algorithm. It is quantum safe. But what if the actual session is compromised and contains the keys to that data? You start to see where this becomes a problem. We also have smart cars and autonomous vehicles that have long shelf lives. We don't even know, to some extent, some of the things that we pushed into space. Thales, for example, builds satellites, and we have to make sure that those things are able to be updated in the field or in space. So therefore, we might have to make sure that that telemetry is post-quantum safe. So this affects us not only as what we build, but also what we consume. We are no different than any other organization. We too have to follow best practices. So we're expecting our suppliers, the supply chain, to adhere to making sure that their products and their technologies have the post-quantum roadmap and understand that these have to last longer than just a year or two. The case on the far right, medical devices, this has often been explained, and there's organizations like Dexcom that from the actual life cycle of from birth to end of life, those devices are made so that they are post-quantum safe today. Well, how do we do that? Well, we're using hybrid certificates. We're implementing crypto agility so that if we have to swap something out in the field, we can do that. So as we're building things going forward, you'll start to see more discussions about crypto agility and why that matters to keeping our assets alive. But let's talk about the industry timelines that are affecting a lot of us. You'll hear of this organization, NIST. For those who've been around this has been the body of a U.S. government body that has done enormous service to the whole world. In that, in effect, just making that statement this is not a U.S. centric. Being that we're all, members of the world, we all look to this as being a very significant standardization process. What this allowed us to do was by working with the NIST organization, we've seen this go for the last 8 years, cryptographic algorithms coming in for standardization. A lot of them were put under incredible duress by the community at large. It was rounded down to a number of finalists, and we have released, I should say, NIST has released as of this past August 2024, August 13th, the three candidates. Now they're called, they're now certified algorithms. You'll have heard crystals, Kyber, lithium, and Sphinx. Now you'll hear FIPS 203, 204, 205, or MLChem, MLDSA, and SLHDSA. So digital signature, key encapsulation, and a backup digital signature algorithm. Falcon will follow shortly. Also, I'll just plug Thales. We're one of the happy organizations that one of our algorithms was selected, and you'll see that in 2025. But also behind the scene, we are working with NIST and many other organizations collaboratively. That there are dozens of algorithms in process, such that if these algorithms that have just been released don't stand up to time, like RSA and ECC, we've got backups. So this is an ongoing process. This is not stopping anytime soon. This is not a one and done. You're going to hear lots more about the next generation of algorithms, but we're going to focus on the ones that are available now that we can start working with now. So as I mentioned, it's not just NIST, it's a worldwide, it takes a village approach. So you'll notice a lot of the brands and a lot of the organizations that are listed here, most organizations are quite active. This is the most collaborative effort in the history of cyber. Why so? Well, because not only is our cyber companies absolutely dependent on cryptography, they also are making sure that their products don't break fix something else. So we are all working together, and the world's largest organizations that have cybersecurity products are absolutely united on solving this together. We don't have a choice. The nation states are active. We can argue that the Chinese government is working diligently to be the first to have a cryptographically relevant quantum computer. It is a race to the moon. So we like to think that the North American and rest of world constituents in that area of expertise are going to be there first. But there won't be, quote, an announcement that somebody has figured out a way to compromise existing crypto. That's why this flip side of the good that comes with quantum computing is also the unfortunate bad side. Same as with artificial intelligence, the wonderful advantages that AI brings to the world also, unfortunately, can be used to the detriment of organizations and governments worldwide. So we look at this, again, as a collective approach. We belong to all of the above, and we have representation in all of these areas. But I'm very excited to share that never before has this collaboration been seen, and it's working quite well to get us where we need to be. But what is that? Where do we need to be? Well, guess what? There's timelines. If we don't put lines in the sand or in stone, procrastination rules, and that is just human nature. If I don't have to do something today to a problem that's years away or a year away, again, I don't know when it is, when do I have to start? So what you'll start to see is organizations have already aligned themselves that at least at the very minimum, we want to make sure that our software and our firmware is PQC safe. So that's the advent of hybrid certificates being used in public key infrastructure. So code signing for firmware, for documents, software packages, absolutely, we want to get that in place in 2025. And that's what you're starting to see here is the CNSA mandates. That of course, is aligned with web browsers, servers, cloud services. So all the Google's Azure and AWS and IBM and all the other cloud services organizations are absolutely aligned on that. And so you'll start to see what is alignment just turn into standards. And so we're working with that on an ongoing basis. And the rest just falls, and it may be change priority over the next year or two, but that includes, of course, traditional networking equipment vendors. We're one of those for our, as I said, our high-speed encryptors, as well as our Luna HSMs. And storing keys and signing and encrypting information is critical to what we provide. So, of course, our own products will follow suit, and we have those things coming, and we can talk a little bit about that. So again, things are moving forward. Why? Because we've moved from theory to practical or theory to reality. As of August, these are real, and we're moving into 2025 with significant vigor. Around the globe, this is a unanimous work effort, and we're starting to see organizations utilize and leverage each other's success and best practices. But it really comes down to one thing: what's going to be the path to success for organizations? And the success that we're starting to see is pragmatic plans being put in place. And this is where I'm going to segue into what you can do now. And this whole idea of PQC project planning or PQC readiness planning, whatever you want to call it, this is just a high level, and again, somewhat retrospective for some organizations, but going forward, a lot of organizations are asking me and asking our organization, well, what do I do? What do I start with? Or what do you think about that? And what we're seeing is that just getting people into a room, I know it sounds a little bit naive to say that calling a meeting matters, but it actually does, because what you're really in essence doing is shaking the tree a little bit and pulling the people into the organization that are stakeholders. And that means your executives have a fiduciary responsibility, who have, again, their shareholders are asking them, what's your plan? What if this were to happen to us? How would that affect us? So this is coming into play as we speak. And it's taking what we have in-house, as well as looking for and seeking knowledge with subject matter experts from all over the world. Again, we're all able to connect using any type of web communications tool. We're on one right now, but more importantly, it's getting people into the room and saying, we've got a problem, let's put something in place. And you don't have to start from scratch. There's lots of templates available through large systems integrators that are now doing this today. But more importantly, you've got to have budget. And if you've got budget, grab it, put it here, set it aside, but also look at what, say, for example, the US federal government is doing, and they're setting aside, say, 7.x billion just to get crypto inventory underway for the US federal government. And I'm going to get to that in a subsequent slide. But it turns this into get your project schedule underway. Plan for what you expect to be a desired state based on what you currently have. And then, as I mentioned, the crypto discovery, I'm going to walk through a little bit of that in some detail, but also rely on your ecosystem. There's a lot of us in the business that have been doing this a long time, and we have expertise that we can lend, and we can become trusted advisors. So we'd like to think of ourselves as one of, but there are many people that you'll probably need to come up with a holistic approach. So this is a good way of looking at it. It's a curvy road. The path to post-quantum cryptography, post-quantum readiness, it's complex. There's differing opinions on how to do it best, what works. Again, the size of the enterprise, where you are in the ecosystem, how you're going to adapt, how you're going to adopt. So what we recommend is that from a risk assessment point of view, this is where organizations like Encryption Consulting can come in and say, hey, let's sit you down. Let's look at what you've got. Let's understand how your public key infrastructure is being used, what is affected by the other constituents, and let's sit down and come up with a plan, a pragmatic plan. But the first and probably the most popular thing within that plan is understanding what you have. And sometimes for the first time, and mostly for the first time, a cryptographic bill of materials, a cryptographic discovery and inventory process needs to be started. And why? Well, first of all, it's all about crypto hygiene going forward as well. Because for the first time, when we really didn't have to worry about how crypto was being used because it was impervious, now those are potential compromise points. We now need to know where everything is. Think of it as like a haystack full of needles. They're hard to find on a good day. But what if you can make all those needles glow and you can actually pull all that information into one critical knowledge base called a cryptographic bill of materials? So that means everything from certificates to secrets to ciphers to algorithms to protocols to libraries, you name it. We can crawl across the entire organization and collectively pull that together. And based on that, we now know what are the areas that we need to address today, as well as you're going to find maybe some stuff isn't where it needs to be or is not up to date of what it's supposed to be. Why are we still using DES, triple DES, and SHA-1? That stuff was deprecated years ago. Or why am I using custom crypto for an externally facing application? That breaks all compliance within the organization. For the first time, you're going to find things that you had no idea existed. And that truth shall set you free is an element of how you're going to get to the next level. And then it moves quickly over to setting up a test environment and building a cryptographic center of excellence. It doesn't have to be 2 stories of 100 people. It can be literally a small lab within your organization. And you start to look at things like repatriating keys to HSMs or making sure that your keys in the wild are managed appropriately, like your database encryption keys are managed using a key management platform, maybe from Thales, maybe from somebody else, or maybe you want to understand more about certificate lifecycle management. Again, all things that Encryption Consulting can provide you details on, and bring in the vendors that do a really good job of that. Whether it be DigiCert, KeyFactor, Venafi, or AppViewX that does certificate lifecycle management. It could be Guaranteer. It could be all sorts of ecosystem vendors that we all know and appreciate. We want to make sure that you understand that this is a big ecosystem that we can work with. And this gets into why cryptography is now probably one of the most sought after, or at least information about cryptography's most sought after element moving forward, is because it's everywhere. It's embedded in everything we use. It's embedded in all things that operationalize our environment. And we took it for granted for all these years. Well, guess what? We can't do that anymore. We now need to find all those certs and identities, those keys and secrets. Again, you don't know what's necessarily being used at your desktop, but you also probably don't know what's being used across your enterprise from a networking environment. And you're going to hear things like cryptographic posture management. You're going to hear about things like cryptographic automation or cryptographic agility, again, at the back end. And those are things that are now being highlighted as we rebuild this and earthquake-proof our homes or our buildings. You're going to see that when we rebuild it, we're going to do it differently. We're going to make this completely agile going forward, and we're going to automate a lot of what was traditionally done by hand. In other words, we're not going to necessarily write every line of code and specify algorithms or specify policies. We're going to make these crypto control planes much more flexible. And that's what you're going to see and hear going forward. So this is all about identifying, again, your vulnerabilities. But as I mentioned, every organization will tell you they don't know where all of their assets are. They couldn't possibly know where all their keys are. They thought they did. They did their best to, track that, perhaps even have a spreadsheet for their certificates to make sure they don't expire. But we all know there's really awesome commercial off-the-shelf solutions that do that for you. As I mentioned, I've got so many great things to say about so many vendors. I hope I don't forget someone in this presentation, but there's a lot of superb products out there today that can do this for you. And we work with all of the above. But it gets you on this migration path to PQC readiness. It also triggers compliance factors, such as making sure that all of the things that you do going forward use the latest and greatest. And that really gives people peace of mind to know that we've now got cryptographic compliance in terms of how we protect our data, but also how we build our systems going forward. And that's not just on-prem. That's making sure that as we move back and forth from the cloud, whether we're repatriating information or data from the cloud back to on-prem or vice versa, where are the keys? How are they being managed? Are we managing keys unilaterally, or are we only doing certain use cases, protecting the most critical or sensitive keys? No, we can do this all collectively. And this is what another reason for doing your PQC Readiness project does, is it uncovers the things that we need to fix along the way. So again, I won't go into all the criticality of every element here, but I think you get by listening that keys are everywhere. Ciphers are everywhere. Libraries are deployed everywhere. APIs, algorithms that we, again, took for granted. Once you find all this information in your file systems, you're now able to look and see how we're running certain processes, why we're storing certificates in a certain location, how we're interfacing to the network. So everything is dependent on everything else. But more importantly, it's understanding that we can actually get a hold of this, and we can start to control by understanding where and how our cryptography is being used. So that was a lot, but I'm going to wrap this up by explaining again, to summarize, that the definition of crypto agility is evolving. And as we're getting more sophisticated in terms of how we're approaching this problem, we're learning that, by the way, while we're doing this, let's make sure that our entire framework, for example, as I mentioned, is crypto agile. Let's make sure that the algorithms are not built in so that we have to do this all over again every 6 months. That's just not going to scale. There's no way that you'll be able to go and replace dilithium, for example. If you dedicate everything to just dilithium, no, you will not be able to swap it out. Sometimes these initiatives take years, and we know how long it was to move to some of the other algorithms in the past. It took years, if not decades, to get there. So compliance and adaptability now has this wonderful opportunity to shift with the times. It means that we can become compliant by having a flexible and crypto agile environment. So that's where you're, as I said, you're managing now certificates automatically. You're not using a spreadsheet. Hey, I know Excel is a great tool, and I know a lot of people can show you some really cool things they do with that as an application, as a database, as an automation methodology. We want to get to a point where commercial off-the-shelf solutions for certificate management and posture management are better deployed. So moving forward, interoperability, we're building these standards in real time. It's working really, really well to get to what we all want, which is in effect resilience. You're never going to have a perfect impenetrable environment, but we're going to get to the 5 nines if we all work together. So as you see on the right, it's about all the choices you're making, but it's also working within the ecosystem that is making some of the choices very simple for us and not painting us into a corner as to how it's going to get done. These standards are evolving, that everybody understands the basic tenets. That, again, crypto agility is not putting you in a proprietary environment. It's putting you into the exact opposite. It's open standards that everybody adheres to. So I thought it'd be relevant as we wrap up here that maybe one example is a wonderful company that everybody knows a lot about if you're US based, is our friends at Wells Fargo, who made it very public just over probably close to 2 years ago now, working with Thales and the likes of Quantinuum and many others, inclusive of Broadcom and others, that we're all trying to work together to get to the far right, which is what's called quantum resiliency. So they took the opportunity with their executives to say, we as an organization want to set the stage. We want to be leaning into this, setting the standard, but really showing a responsible approach to why they need to do this for not only their own organization, but also how they interoperate with the rest of the world's financial community. I mean, banks transfer value from bank to bank. We all know how that works. And Thales is the back end for the entire SWIFT network worldwide. Well, why does that matter? Well, if you're moving 2 trillion a day through over 60,000 HSMs, it's a good idea that we work together. So this means that Wells Fargo, looking at this from a current crypto state, what we call operational, not legacy, trying to get to a desired state or PQC future state, shows that they're looking at how they're going to move away from legacy algorithms to crypto agile use of PQC algorithms. Same thing with key management, same thing with legacy certificates. We want to move to dual signature TLS certificates from the browser community. We also want to make sure that all of our libraries and our APIs are critically designed so that they're flexible, and so that we make sure that we use the latest and the greatest, so that if we do make the change, this is simply a washover and we can simply make those changes in real time. This is really exciting to see that organizations like Wells taking a step forward in this regard. But it all comes down to a really simple approach that it's been long. It's a bit of a cliche for many, but trust but verify. It's great for vendors to tell you all the things that they know and all the wonderful things that they build and how we're all going to work together. And it's going to be kumbaya. But really what we're all saying is, don't trust us, trust but verify, meaning that you're going to bring a lot of these technology partners in. You're also going to stipulate that as you purchase products, you can start to ask questions like, explain your PQC roadmap to me. Show me how you're going to make this work within my environment. And this means that we're going to bring in external sources, third parties to come in and attest to that. But it all comes back to, don't build it in a vacuum. Don't use an echo chamber to listen to what your beliefs are as it pertains to cryptography. You're going to get one person in the room that says this is a 10-year away problem. You're going to get someone in the room saying the sky is falling. It's somewhere in the middle. So that's why you need to have third parties that give you independent attestation as to applying the right procedures and so on. So that means you're going to speak to the encryption consulting people and large systems integrators if they need to be involved. And again, assessment, review, and communicate. So that's really, in essence, what we're trying to talk about today, is that it takes a lot of people, but you got to get started. And to get to an approved environment, we all know that it takes, again, a village to make that happen. So I just wanted to say thank you to Encryption Consulting for inviting me here today. If you have any questions about anything that I've covered off today, including my week start, I'd be more than happy to answer those questions. Speak to your Encryption Consulting contacts. And I've put the website, which takes you to our entire resource pool for post-quantum related assets and information. But more importantly, speak to Encryption Consulting first, set up an appointment, and we're more than happy to have a conversation with you. And with that, I just want to say thank you and look forward to talking to you in the future. Well, hello, everyone. That was interesting to watch myself present. Hi, Serbi.
Thank you. Yes, hello. Hi, Blair. Thank you, Blair. That was really informative. Let's now open the floor for some questions. I do see a few questions popping in. Let's start with the first one. So the first question that we have is any one physical method of QRNG generation that is better or more random than the others?
So if I understood your question, is there a QRNG solution vendor that is better than others within, is that what the question was, just to confirm?
Yes.
So I'll take I'll approach this pragmatically. There are several QRNG solutions available today. Some have been around for quite some time, approaching the 10-year mark. The way that I respond to this is that there are options for customers to consider. There are chips on board options. There are solution vendors that provide entropy or QRNG as a service. There are so many great choices for organizations to consider. One of the things that I would hold to account, or these organizations to account, is that they are all going through various certifications through NIST, and when I say that, meaning it's one thing to say you have a QRNG capability, but now we're getting into the discussion points around provable randomness. In other words, if I were to use any of these solutions, by the way, Thales supports multiple external sources of entropy or QRNG, as well as in our high-speed encryptor, we use a specific chip on board option. Our Thales federal team also has a chip on board option, but they also support external sources of entropy, such as Quantinium, such as Crypt, such as QSide, and others. This quantum dice is another one you'll hear often. And so we take a somewhat agnostic approach, but more importantly, we take the approach that if they can prove their capabilities, that they are truly random, then we like to look at our customers as making that decision, and we support that through a generic PKCS11 interface to our current Luna HSMs, or with our high-speed encryption, we would use, say, for example, open standards like EC-014. So again, I hope I answered that as carefully as possible. No one is better necessarily than the other. That's for them to prove on their own merit, and we are looking very much forward to working with many of those vendors. As you probably know, we support the Quantinuum product, as for example, as part of our PQC starter kit. So you can find that information available just by simply typing in PQC starter kit Thales or PQC starter kit Quantinuum, and then they can explain that in much more detail.
Okay, that sounds perfect. So moving to the next question, it is, how do I know if my entropy is good enough?
Oh, good question. And this is more of a technical question for my colleagues. When people ask about whether my entropy is good enough, our current products and the industry support the standard for entropy as, and I wish I had that reference policy number, but this is commonly known that in order for us, for example, to receive FIPS validation and accreditation to level 3, FIPS 140-3 level 3, those products all have built-in entropy sources, RNG sources. So I would refer to our documentation, and if anybody has any questions to detail that or in more detail, please pop that in the chat, and we'll respond to you with those answers. My product managers would be able to answer that in great detail, but me at the high level, that's how I would answer that question.
Okay, great. So the next question is, how expensive are QRNG solutions to procure and implement?
Wow, a lot of QRNG questions today. It depends. An example is a chip solution. You can see in the range of $100 US per chip is in the range, but we see them as low as $15. It goes back to my point: you pay for what you get, or you have to look at what instead of just a checkbox it's whether or not that provides provable randomness. And one of the examples of provable randomness, just to point that out, is with Quantinuum. They use what's called the Bell test. And this puts them in the category of setting the bar for organizations to say, well, what kind of randomness are you looking for? What they will show you on this Bell test is that we can get to 2 to the power of 280, which apparently is more atoms than there are in the universe. Meaning that I think that's a pretty good testament to QRNG randomness. And why do you want better randomness, better entropy? Obviously, because you want the best available in this time. More importantly, because you're creating, keys and certificates from a post-quantum point of view, larger key size and so on and so forth. It behooves us to look at what's available now. So what you're going to see is already underway at NIST is a QRNG working group is already underway, managed by Palo Alto. And so many of the companies I just mentioned are part of that collaboration, not just to more importantly, for them to remain consistent in how you interface and integrate those solutions. So I would recommend that you simply do some Googling or reach out to me, and I can connect you with those people.
Okay, perfect. So the last question that we have is, I'm thinking about a PQC migration, and I heard the NIST PQCs have larger key sizes. Does that mean that strong entropy is even more important for PQC algorithms?
As to my last point, absolutely. I think this is a really good testament to, just because we've had something a certain way with conventional RNG or even conventional QRNG, newer techniques, better proof models, if it's available, then we're going to take advantage of it. And more importantly, if the impact is negligible in terms of performance or negligible in terms of cost, I think like any progress in any technology, let's use the best that's available. So I think you'll see this naturally streamed into, well, I can speak for Thales. We do support and will continue to support QRNG going forward for all of our products. And not only just for our HSMs, but look at this from a virtual point of view. There are some solutions that will provide entropy to virtual machines. And one of the things that a lot of people are not aware of is one of the concerns with entropy historically has been, where do I derive that entropy from? And if I'm in a virtual environment, a virtual machine is virtually a copy of another virtual machine's entropy, which means you're creating certificate overlap. So much so that many years ago, the entropy as a service reference architecture at NIST by I'm trying to think of the Dr. Apostle Vasilev, to be specific. You could research entropy as a service in that regard, identified that over as high as 15% of certificates are actually duplicates in terms of entropy. So this is why, while you're at it, use the best, because you're building the newest. And so as we progress with all technologies, again, it's best practice to look at this pragmatically and understand that you should be very, very much aware of QRNG.
Okay, great. So those were all the questions that we have for this session. Before we end everything, Blair, do you have any final thoughts for the audience?
Do I have any final asks, or does the audience have?
Yes.
So sorry, Survi, I apologize. Is there any other questions coming, or did you have I apologize, I misunderstood your question.
I was just telling you that those were all the questions that we had for the session. And while we're closing in, do you have any final thoughts that you want to share with the audience?
Yes, sure, absolutely. Final thoughts are: get started if you haven't already. Take this approach that any type of procrastination to this particular era or undertaking of post-quantum readiness is not necessarily a good approach. As I jokingly say, procrastination is not a good plan. And I know human nature is that we have naturally and every day we're dealing with ransomware related issues, generic security issues, building an infrastructure that's impervious, if we will, to threats and so on. That's the goal. But this absolutely needs to be one of those priorities. The entire world is well aware that we're shifting into a new paradigm of cryptography for the first time in the history of computing. This is 1,000x on a scale greater than anyone had anticipated, because the advent of quantum computers, they're coming and there's nothing we can do about it. The good, the bad, and the otherwise is something that we embrace the same as we do with AI. AI provides fantastic upside, but it also is the risk and so on associated with AI used for the wrong reasons. The same holds true for quantum computers. So I think organizations can be comfortable now. 2025 is a great start for organizations to get their house in order. Cryptographic hygiene is super important, if I haven't made that crystal clear in my talk today. So I think anybody that's listening today, reach out, get started. We're more than willing to start that conversation with you with Encryption Consulting. So I look forward to those types of conversations.
Okay, great. So thank you once again, Blair, for guiding us through such a critical topic that is becoming a top priority for all organizations. And to our audience, thank you for participating. Please stick around. We've got more great sessions lined up for you. And I'll see you there next year.
Thank you.
Okay, great. Thank you.
All right, bye-bye.